In All the Pretty Horses, John Grady and Rollins have many experiences on their journey. McCarthy hints to the readers that the idea of blood is a very important concept within the book. He surrounds blood with the idea of relationships, violence, and country. Throughout All the Pretty Horses, there are many relationships involving many of the characters in the book. When we think of relationships, we think of family, love, and nature. McCarthy demonstrates the relationships between horses, nature, and family, and incorporates the idea of blood to symbolize the connections being made. Horses played an essential role in this novel. Most of the characters had some type of connection with horses. John Grady had a passion for horses and felt connected to them mentally. Specifically, quote, "What he loved in horses was what he loved in men, the blood and the heat of the blood that ran through them." Here we see the deep connection between man and horse. The blood that he is describing symbolizes power, beauty, and strength. All these characteristics are both in man and horse, and that is why he loves the connection to the horse. Another example is when John was working with the colt. They were working with wild horses and, quote, "They did not smell like horses, they smelled like what they were, wild animals," end quote. The horses that they were working with did not have a lot of experience with humans. This also shows that all horses are not alike. They have different blood, and that makes them unique. There is also a connection between the characters and the nature around them in Mexico. McCarthy uses descriptive imagery to capture the scene involving a blood red color. Along their journey, John Grady and Rollins are resting and see, quote, "A long fan of light ran out from the east and the rising sun swelled blood red along the horizon," end quote. McCarthy here symbolizes the connection between man and nature. John Grady and Rollins share these moments of beauty and color. McCarthy shares these images with the readers so they can experience the connection themselves. McCarthy also hints in various places where there is a relationship involving with family. This symbolizes the blood that is passed down from generation to generation. When we think of family, we think of heritage and the blood that connects a family. Alfonso has a very strong influence on Alejandra. Alfonso also claims that, quote, "She is much more like me at that age, and I seem at times to be struggling with my own past self," end quote. We see the similarities between the two. Alfonso and Alejandra are both strong women and demonstrate that they share the same blood or traits. Alfonso also emphasizes the idea that there is, quote, "a certain extravagance in the female blood of this family," end quote. She says this to John Grady to warn him that she is very important within this family. The generations of females are very strong and very honorable. Thus, there is a similar blood that runs through them. McCarthy demonstrates throughout the novel many relationships and how they affect each and every character.
Blood is commonly perceived as a symbol of violence or of death. In the literary world, blood is used to display a character's motive or the consequences of violent actions. Characters can be driven by a thirst for blood and desire for power, or rather by family values and the importance of honor. In Mexico, the boys learn how ruthless some people are in the pursuit of power. Alfonso verbalizes this idea to John Grady when she says, "What is constant in history is greed and foolishness and the love of blood, and this is a thing that even God, who knows all that can be known, seems powerless to change." Here, the inclusion of blood represents the motive for the characters in the book as well as all throughout history. This example is one of the times that the use of blood has a negative meaning. Alfonso finds that such an approach to rising through the ranks is not the best there is. One of the times that blood is used in a positive context is when John Grady told him that Blevins was his brother and that he had taken a blood oath not to return to his father without the captain's head. In this part, the blood represents honor. John Grady and Blevins are not actually brothers, and no father gave John Grady that order, but his violent actions stem from the relationship he had with Blevins and the importance they had to one another. Lastly, the image of blood also serves as an indicator of guilt and consequences. After John Grady kills the cuchillero, his clothes sagged with the weight of blood. The weight of blood is literal in terms of the amount, as well as figurative in regards to the guilt that John Grady had to carry, which was so heavy it weighed him down.
The context of blood that ties in with country is shown many times in McCarthy's work. The meaning of country can mean race or origin, which are all tied to our past in the blood that runs through us. We are distinguished by our blood physically, causing often a prejudice against people who aren't our race. It is seen when Rollins and John Grady first meet Blevins. They ask why they should let him join on their journey, as he responds, "'Cause I'm an American," which symbolizes how they should trust him due to their tie by origin. When the boys reach Mexico and pass strangers on their journey, McCarthy writes, "If they were surprised to see Americans horseback in that country, they gave no sign." Meaning that the Mexicans knew right away they were Americans. They had no chance of blending in, as people from a different country stand out due to their races. Later, when the wax traders are talking to John Grady about Blevins, they ask, "Es su hermano El Rubio?" which depicts how outsiders suppose these kids are related, even though all they have common is skin color. Blood is a barrier between John Grady and Alejandra because they are from different worlds. Once they fall in love, he is blinded by their differences, which makes their love impossible. He didn't realize this, quote, until the Arabian was alongside his horse, stepping with his neck arched and one eye on the mistune, not with weariness, but some faint equine disgust. Though the Arabian horse is small in regard to American kinds, quote, one country is not another, end quote. The Arabian compared to John Grady's horse is parallel to the kids. Even though he has charisma and praise, he only realizes their vast differences when Alejandra, like the Arabian, is much more extravagant and graceful and worthy of looking down upon John Grady. The differences in culture are extreme. Quote, even in a place like this where we are concerned with fundamental things, the mind of the Anglo is closed in this rare way, end quote. The wall between the two different countries is too difficult for a connection. Even though we are all people with the same fundamentals, different cultures cause war and lack of peace. Quote, they said it was no accident of circumstance that a man be born in a certain country and not some other, end quote, meaning that there was a reason they can't be together. Their worlds are far too different and the past can't be ignored, thus love between Alejandra and John Grady is forbidden. Near the end of the book, when John is alone and deserted by everyone else, quote, he thought the world's heart beat at some terrible cost, and that the world's pain and its beauty moved in a relationship of diverging equity, and that in this headlong deficit the blood of multitudes might ultimately be exacted for the vision of a single flower, end quote. This may be the most existential quote in the novel. John Grady is thinking about how the world is in a downward spiral because of human nature that is unable to be accepting, which leads us only to be standing in each other's way. This is masked by Earth's beauty. Even though the world is made up of different cultures, he realizes that we may be linked by blood. And the, quote, blood of multitudes, end quote, that seem to all be against each other really all have the same goal. If we could realize that, maybe we wouldn't have as many barriers and difficulties and differences that cause us to be separate from each other by blood. Blood is represented figuratively and literally in all the pretty horses. Physical violence and bloodshed is literally shown as a theme, as well as ties by blood through relationships bound by love or family, and lastly, through the country one is from, drawn together by race and origin.